My name is Maya, and I am 31 years old. I was standing outside an apartment I had never seen before in a city where my husband told me he was attending a business conference. In my hands was a chocolate birthday cake I had baked myself a surprise for the man I had loved for 9 years. The door was slightly open. I pushed it gently and saw him. Garrett was holding a newborn baby standing beside a woman lying exhausted on a bed. The cake slipped from my fingers. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If stories about truth, betrayal, and finding strength resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me tell you how I discovered that my entire marriage was built on lies. I met Garrett 9 years ago at a local art exhibition fundraiser in Colorado Springs. I was 22 then, fresh out of college, working my first year as an elementary school teacher. He was 26, charming with dark brown hair and a smile that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. He told me he was an architect, passionate about designing spaces that brought people together. We bonded over our shared love for community work and our belief in building something meaningful in life. Our courtship was everything I had dreamed of. Garrett would surprise me with handwritten notes tucked into my purse. He would show up at my school with coffee and pastries just because he was thinking of me. He listened when I talked about my students, remembered their names, asked about their progress. I thought I had found a man who truly cared. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony surrounded by family and close friends. My parents adored Garrett. His parents welcomed me like a daughter. We bought a modest 2-story house in a quiet suburb of Colorado Springs, with a backyard big enough for the garden I always wanted. I painted the walls soft yellow hung curtains I had sewn myself and filled every room with love. Garrett worked for a large architectural firm headquartered in Denver, about 70 miles from our home. His job required frequent travel between the two cities, sometimes staying in Denver for days at a time for project meetings and client consultations. I understood. Architecture was demanding. Important projects needed on-site supervision. I never questioned the time he spent away. When Garrett was home, our life felt normal. We cooked dinner together on weekends, watched movies curled up on the couch, talked about our dreams for the future. We wanted children. We tried for 4 years. I went through 2 miscarriages, each one breaking my heart a little more. Garrett held me through the grief, told me we would keep trying, promised me we would have our family one day. I believed him. I adopted a cat during my 2nd year of teaching. A tiny orange tabby someone had abandoned near the school parking lot. I named him Peanut because of the peanut-shaped spot on his belly. Peanut became my companion during the lonely nights when Garrett was traveling. He would curl up on my lap while I graded papers, purring softly, making the silence feel less heavy. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there long before I was willing to see them. About 2 years before everything fell apart, small things started to change. Garrett began taking his phone calls outside, even in winter, claiming the reception was better on the porch. He started showering the moment he walked through the door after business trips, saying he felt grimy from travel and wanted to freshen up before hugging me. I remember finding a concert ticket stub in his jacket pocket once. It was for a show in Denver, a band I had never heard of. When I asked about it, Garrett said it belonged to a coworker who had accidentally left it in his car. He said he had already returned it. I nodded and tucked the moment away, not wanting to seem paranoid. There were late-night phone calls he would excuse himself to answer, returning 20 minutes later with explanations about demanding clients in different time zones. There were weekends when he seemed distracted, checking his phone, constantly smiling at messages he never showed me. Once I called him during a business trip at 10 in the evening and heard a child crying in the background. He said he was at a restaurant sitting near a family with a fussy toddler. I believed him because I had no reason not to. I blamed myself for any doubts that crept in. I told myself I was being insecure, that my inability to give Garrett children was making me imagine problems that did not exist. I threw myself into my work, into being the best wife I could be, into proving that our marriage was solid despite the cracks I refused to acknowledge. When Garrett mentioned he had a 4-day business trip to Denver coming up right around his 35th birthday, I saw an opportunity. I would surprise him. I would drive to Denver with a homemade cake show up at his hotel and remind him how much I loved him. I thought it would bring us closer, reignite whatever spark had dimmed over the years. I had no idea I was about to discover the truth that would destroy everything I thought I knew. The morning of Garrett's birthday, I woke up before dawn. I moved quietly through the kitchen, gathering ingredients for his favorite chocolate cake, the same recipe my grandmother had taught me. I measured flour and cocoa powder, cracked eggs into the bowl, stirred the batter with the same love I had poured into our marriage for 7 years. The cake came out perfect, 3 layers, with homemade frosting decorated with the words, "Happy Birthday" in blue icing. I called in sick to school, something I rarely did. I told my coworker Sloan I had a doctor's appointment, packed the cake carefully into a carrier, and loaded it into my car. The drive to Denver would take about an hour and a half. I imagined Garrett's face when he saw me, the surprise and joy in his eyes. I played our wedding song on repeat during the drive, singing along, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. When I reached Denver, I headed straight for the Brown Palace Hotel, the place Garrett had told me he always stayed during business trips. It was an elegant, historic building, the kind of place that made sense for client meetings and professional conferences. I walked up to the front desk with a smile, asking the concierge which room Mr. Garrett Holloway was registered in. The woman behind the desk typed his name into her computer, then shook her head apologetically. There was no guest by that name currently registered. I asked her to check again, perhaps under his company's name. She searched twice more, then confirmed there was no record of him at all. My stomach dropped. I stepped away from the desk, my mind racing through explanations. Maybe the conference was at a different hotel. Maybe there had been a last-minute change. I pulled out my phone and called Garrett. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I remembered that Garrett and I shared our locations with each other through an app on our phones. We had set it up years ago for safety reasons, a way to know the other person was okay during long drives or late nights. I opened the app with trembling fingers and watched the little dot that represented Garrett appear on the map. He was not at any hotel. He was not at a conference center or a client's office. The dot was stationary at a residential address in a neighborhood I did not recognize, somewhere in the northern part of the city. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I typed the address into my navigation and started driving. The neighborhood was modest, a collection of mid-rise apartment buildings with small balconies and parking lots. I pulled into a visitor spot and sat in my car for several minutes, watching the building, trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Garrett was visiting a colleague. Maybe he was looking at a potential project site. Maybe I was being ridiculous. But something in my gut told me to go inside. I carried the cake because I did not know what else to do with it. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, my legs feeling heavier with each step. Apartment 3. B. I stood in front of the door, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I raised my hand to knock, then noticed the door was not fully closed. It had been left slightly ajar, as if someone had stepped out briefly and not bothered to latch it properly. I pushed the door open. The apartment was warm and lived in. There were photographs on the walls, throw pillows on a couch, a small kitchen with dishes drying in a rack. This was not a hotel room. This was someone's home. And there, in the center of the living room, stood my husband. Garrett was holding a baby, a newborn wrapped in a pale yellow blanket so tiny it fit entirely in the crook of his arm. He was swaying gently, humming a lullaby, his back to me. On the bed, pushed against the far wall, lay a woman with long dark hair, pale and exhausted, watching him with tender eyes. The cake carrier slipped from my hands and crashed to the floor. Garrett spun around. The color drained from his face when he saw me standing in the doorway. For a moment, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The only sound was the soft whimpering of the baby he held. The woman on the bed pushed herself up on her elbows. "Who is that, Garrett?" she asked, her voice weak but alarmed. I found my voice before he could answer. I am his wife, I said. The words tasted bitter on my tongue. Who are you? Her eyes went wide. Wife. She looked at Garrett with confusion and horror. You told me you were divorced. You told me she moved to another state years ago. The room spun around me. I gripped the door frame to steady myself, my gaze moving from the woman to the baby to the photographs on the wall. One picture showed Garrett with his arm around this woman, both of them smiling at the camera. Another showed them at what looked like a birthday party, a little girl with dark pigtails blowing out candles on a cake. I pointed at the photograph. Who is that child? Garrett's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The woman answered for him. That is Lily, our daughter. She is 4 years old. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. 4 years old. Garrett had been living this double life for at least 5 years. Every business trip, every late-night phone call, every excuse about demanding clients, it had all been lies. He had another family, another woman. 2 children I never knew existed. I backed toward the door, unable to look at him any longer. Garrett set the baby down in a bassinet and rushed toward me, reaching for my arm. Maya, please let me explain. It is not what you think. I can make you understand. I pulled away from his touch like his fingers were made of fire. Do not touch me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Do not ever touch me again. I ran down the stairs, nearly falling twice, my vision blurred with tears. I made it to my car, somehow collapsed into the driver's seat, and sat there shaking for what felt like hours. The cake I had baked with so much love was splattered across the floor of an apartment where my husband had built a life without me. I did not know how long I sat there before I could breathe normally again. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was not going to fall apart. I was going to find out everything, every lie, every secret, every betrayal. And then I was going to make Garrett face the truth he had tried so hard to hide. I did not go home that night. Instead, I drove back to Colorado Springs and went straight to Sloane's apartment. She opened the door in her pajamas, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without asking questions. I sat at her kitchen table and told her everything while she made tea neither of us would drink. Sloane listened with her hand over her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief. When I finished, she did not offer empty comfort or tell me I must have misunderstood. She said exactly what I needed to hear. You need evidence, you need a lawyer, and you need to find out how deep this goes. Sloane had a cousin named Kendall who worked as a paralegal at a family law firm. She called her that night despite the late hour, and Kendall agreed to meet with me the next morning. By the time the sun rose, I had a plan forming in my mind. I would not confront Garrett again until I knew everything. I would gather proof of every lie, every hidden dollar, every secret he had kept from me. Then I would decide what to do. Kendall was sharp and pragmatic. She reviewed my situation over coffee at a diner near her office, jotting notes on a legal pad. She told me I needed to hire a private investigator to document Garrett's double life and uncover any financial deception. She gave me the name of Warren Bishop, a former police detective who specialized in infidelity and fraud cases. I contacted Warren that afternoon. He was a quiet man in his 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner. I told him what I had discovered, showed him the address of the apartment, gave him Garrett's schedule as far as I knew it. He said he would have preliminary findings within 2 weeks. While Warren worked, I did something that took more courage than anything I had ever done. I reached out to the woman from the apartment. I found her on social media easily enough. Her name was Jocelyn, and her profile was public. Photographs of her with Lily, the little girl, from the pictures on the wall. Posts about motherhood and her job at a bank. A few images that included Garrett tagged as her partner. I sent her a message asking if she would be willing to meet. I explained that I was not angry at her, that I understood she had been deceived too. She responded within an hour, agreeing to meet at a coffee shop in Denver. 2 days later, I sat across from Jocelyn in a quiet corner booth. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, the new baby sleeping in a carrier beside her. She told me her story, and it was heartbreakingly similar to mine. Jocelyn had met Garrett 5 years ago at a networking event for young professionals. He had charmed her the same way he had charmed me with attention and compliments and promises of a future together. He told her he was divorced, that his ex-wife had relocated across the country, that there were no children and no remaining ties. Jocelyn had no reason to doubt him. They moved in together after a year. Lily was born the following spring. Garrett doted on their daughter when he was around, but he traveled constantly for work. Jocelyn accepted this because she believed his career demanded it. She asked about marriage occasionally, and Garrett always said the timing was not right yet, that he wanted to be more financially stable first, that they would make it official soon. She started having doubts about a year ago. Garrett was always unavailable during major holidays, claiming family obligations with his elderly parents. He never introduced her to any relatives or friends from his life before they met. His explanations grew thinner, his absences longer. But she pushed the doubts aside because she loved him, because they had a child together, because she wanted to believe. Then I showed up at her door on his birthday, and everything she thought she knew crumbled, just like everything I had believed. Jocelyn cried as she talked. I cried too. We were two women who had loved the same man, trusted the same lies, built our lives around the same illusion. Neither of us was the villain in this story. We were both victims. Before we left the coffee shop, Jocelyn told me something that made my blood run cold. Garrett had been unusually secretive about his phone lately. She had glimpsed messages from someone named Ingrid, messages that seemed flirtatious and intimate. She had confronted him about it once, and he had dismissed it as a demanding client who did not understand professional boundaries. Ingrid. Another name. Another woman, possibly. When Warren delivered his first report a week later, my worst fears were confirmed. Garrett did not just have a second family. He had been maintaining 2 separate apartments in Denver, one for Jocelyn and the children, and another smaller unit that he used for meetings with other women. Financial records showed he had spent over $200,000 in the past 5 years supporting his double life. He had opened secret bank accounts, hidden income from me, and funneled money into his Denver existence without my knowledge. But the most devastating discovery was what he had done to our home. Garrett had taken out a second mortgage on our house in Colorado Springs, the house I had paid for mostly with my own savings. He had borrowed $120,000 against the property, forging my signature on the documents, and transferred that money to accounts I could not access. He was bleeding me dry while smiling at me across the dinner table. Warren also confirmed the existence of Ingrid. She was 26 years old, a client of Garrett's firm who had hired him to design renovations for her downtown loft. Their relationship had begun 8 months ago, and Garrett had told her he was single, never married, completely unattached. He was running the same playbook on a third woman while maintaining lies with the first 2. I sat in my car after reading the report, staring at pages of evidence that documented the systematic destruction of my life. 7 years of marriage. 9 years of loving someone who had never existed. Every tender moment, every promise, every whispered "I love you," had been part of an elaborate performance. But alongside the devastation, something else was growing inside me. Anger, determination, a cold, clear resolve to make Garrett face consequences for what he had done. He had stolen years of my life, my money, my trust, my chance at the family I wanted. He was not going to walk away from this unscathed. The hardest part of the next few weeks was pretending nothing had changed. After the initial shock, Garrett came home acting as if we could somehow move past what I had seen. He admitted to a moment of weakness with Jocelyn, claimed the baby was an accident, swore the relationship meant nothing compared to our marriage. He begged me to give him a chance to explain, to make things right. I listened to his lies with a calm expression while recording every word on my phone. I nodded when he said he loved me. I let him believe I was considering forgiveness, and all the while I was building my case. Warren continued his surveillance. He photographed Garrett entering Jocelyn's apartment, playing with Lily in the park, taking Ingrid to dinner at expensive restaurants. He documented every dollar Garrett spent, every lie he told, every deception he maintained. I met with Jocelyn twice more during those weeks. We compared notes, shared information, and formed an unlikely alliance. She was hurt and angry too, but more than that, she was determined not to raise her children on lies. We agreed that Garrett needed to face the truth publicly, in a way he could not deny or spin. Then I found Ingrid. Tracking her down was easier than I expected. Warren provided her contact information, and I sent her a carefully worded message explaining who I was and what I had discovered. She did not believe me at first. She called me crazy, accused me of being a jealous ex trying to sabotage her relationship with Garrett. I sent her our wedding photo, our marriage certificate, and screenshots of Garrett's messages to Jocelyn. 3 hours later, Ingrid called me back, sobbing. She apologized for not believing me. She said Garrett had seemed so genuine, so devoted, that she never imagined he could be living multiple lives simultaneously. She was horrified to learn about me, about Jocelyn, about the children. I asked if she would be willing to help expose him. She agreed immediately. She wanted him to pay for what he had done. Our plan came together around an upcoming event. The Colorado Architecture Association was hosting its annual awards gala in 2 weeks. Garrett had been nominated for Architect of the Year, a recognition he had been pursuing for years. The ceremony would be held at the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, with colleagues, clients, and family members in attendance. Garrett's parents would be there. My parents had already been invited. It was the perfect stage. 3 days before the gala, I visited Garrett's mother, Diane. She had always treated me like a daughter, calling regularly to check in, sending birthday cards and Christmas gifts, welcoming me into the family with open arms. I loved her, and what I had to tell her would break her heart. We sat in her living room while I laid out the evidence. Photographs of Garrett with Jocelyn and the children. Financial records showing the hidden accounts. Documentation of the forged mortgage. Diane listened in silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, she sat very still for a long moment. Then she began to cry deep, racking sobs that shook her entire body. She kept asking how her son could have done these things, where she had failed as a mother, why he had become someone capable of such cruelty. I held her hand and told her none of this was her fault. Garrett had made his own choices. He had deceived all of us. By the end of our conversation, Diane had made a decision. She would not warn Garrett. She would not give him a chance to flee or prepare defenses. She would stand beside me at the gala and let him face the consequences of his actions. It broke her heart to turn against her own son, but she said she could not support a man who had caused so much pain. The night before the awards ceremony, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and looked at myself. I saw a woman who had been lied to for nearly a decade. A woman who had mourned lost pregnancies while her husband fathered children with another woman. A woman who had trusted completely and been betrayed completely. But I also saw something else. Strength. Resolve. A refusal to be a victim any longer. Tomorrow Garrett would learn that his lies had finally caught up with him. The Broadmoor Hotel glittered with elegance on the night of the gala. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across a ballroom filled with architects, designers, clients, and their families. Waiters in white jackets circulated with champagne and canapes. A podium stood at the front of the room, ready for the award presentations. I wore a black dress, simple and sophisticated, the kind of outfit appropriate for either a celebration or a funeral. Garrett walked beside me, his hand on the small of my back, guiding me through the crowd with practiced charm. He introduced me to colleagues as his wonderful wife, the love of his life. I smiled and nodded, and felt nothing. His parents were already there when we arrived. His father, Richard, greeted us warmly, oblivious to what was coming. Diane hugged me tightly, her eyes communicating a silent message of solidarity. She squeezed my hand twice, our agreed-upon signal that everything was in place. Sloane arrived shortly after, posing as my +1 since partners were allowed. She carried a small laptop bag inside, which was the equipment we needed to broadcast our presentation on the ballroom's main screen. She had coordinated with a sympathetic AV technician who believed he was helping with a surprise tribute video. The ceremony proceeded through various categories: Rising Star Awards, Sustainable Design Recognition, Lifetime Achievement honors for an elderly architect who had designed half the city's skyline. Then came the announcement everyone had been waiting for. The Architect of the Year nominees were called to the stage. Garrett stood among 5 others, beaming with confidence. He had told me this nomination represented everything he had worked toward validation of his talent and dedication. The irony was not lost on me. The winner was announced. It was not Garrett. He applauded politely as a woman in a red dress accepted the trophy, but I could see the disappointment in his eyes. He returned to our table with a tight smile, muttering something about next year. After the formal ceremony ended and the cocktail reception began, I told Garrett I wanted to make a toast to him to celebrate his nomination, even if he had not won. He seemed surprised but pleased. He followed me toward the front of the room, where a microphone stood available for guests to make remarks. As I took the microphone, I caught Sloane's eye across the room. She nodded slightly. Everything was ready. I tapped the microphone to get the room's attention. Good evening, everyone. For those who do not know me, I am Maya Holloway, Garrett's wife of 7 years. I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge my husband and share some things about him that many of you may not know. I paused, letting the room quiet down. Garrett stood near the front, looking up at me with an expression of pleased anticipation. My husband is a man of many talents, I continued. He is a skilled architect, a charming conversationalist, and as it turns out, an extraordinarily accomplished liar. The room went still. Garrett's smile froze on his face. I nodded to Sloane and the large screen behind me flickered to life. The first image appeared. A photograph of Garrett with Jocelyn, his arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling at the camera. This is Jocelyn, I said calmly. She has been Garrett's partner for 5 years. She believed he was divorced when they met. She had no idea I existed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Garrett took a step toward the stage, his face pale. Maya, what are you doing? He hissed. I continued as if he had not spoken. The next slide showed Lily's birthday party photograph. This is Lily. She is 4 years old. She is Garrett's daughter. The next image was of the newborn in Garrett's arms, and this baby was born last week, also Garrett's child. The murmurs became gasps. I heard Richard Holloway's voice somewhere in the crowd demanding to know what was happening. The presentation continued. Financial records showing hidden accounts, documentation of the forged mortgage, screenshots of messages between Garrett and Ingrid. Each piece of evidence appeared on screen while I narrated, calmly laying out the full scope of his deception. Then the side door of the ballroom opened and Jocelyn walked in, pushing a stroller with the newborn inside. Lily held her hand, looking around the fancy room with wide, curious eyes. Behind them came Ingrid, arms crossed, face set with determination. Garrett spun around and saw them. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jocelyn spoke first, her voice cutting across the stunned silence. He told me he was divorced. He told me his ex-wife moved away. He lied to me for 5 years while I raised his children alone. Ingrid stepped forward. He told me he had never been married, that he was completely single. I only found out about Maya and Jocelyn last week. The room erupted. Garrett's colleagues stared at him with shock and disgust. His father pushed through the crowd, grabbing Garrett by the shoulders, demanding an explanation. His mother stood apart, tears streaming down her face, unable even to look at her son. Garrett tried to salvage the situation. These women are lying, he shouted. This is all a misunderstanding. Maya, please, you have to believe me. I stepped down from the small stage and walked toward him slowly. The crowd parted to let me through. 7 years, I said quietly, loud enough for those nearby to hear. 7 years I loved you. I supported you. I grieved with you when I lost our babies. And the whole time you were building another life, spending our money, having children with someone else. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document. This is a petition for divorce. My lawyer will be in contact with you tomorrow. Do not come home. Do not call me. Do not ever speak to me again. I pressed the papers into his chest and stepped back. Sloane appeared at my side, taking my arm, guiding me toward the exit. Behind me, I heard Garrett calling my name, his voice cracking with desperation. I heard Lily asking her mother why Daddy looked so upset. I heard Richard Holloway's voice breaking as he confronted the son he thought he knew. I did not turn around. Sloane drove me home that night. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, feeling strangely empty. Not relieved, not triumphant, just hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left only a shell behind. When we pulled into my driveway, Sloane asked if I wanted her to stay. I shook my head. I needed to be alone, needed to process what had happened without anyone watching. I went inside, scooped up Peanut, and sat on the couch in the dark for a very long time. The house felt different now, contaminated by lies. Every wall. Garrett had helped me paint every piece of furniture we had chosen together, every memory we had made in these rooms, all of it was tainted. But it was also mine. My house. My life. And I would rebuild it without him. The aftermath of the gala spread quickly through professional and social circles. Word traveled fast about the architect who had been publicly exposed as a bigamist and con artist. Articles appeared in local news outlets, some sympathetic to the women he had deceived, others focused on the scandal itself. Garrett's firm terminated his employment within 48 hours, citing damage to the company's reputation. Within a week, Garrett had become a pariah. Clients pulled their projects. Colleagues refused his calls. Industry contacts who had respected him now treated him like a cautionary tale. His nomination for Architect of the Year became a punchline rather than an honor. The legal consequences followed swiftly. I retained Preston Howard, an experienced divorce attorney who had handled high-asset cases involving fraud and hidden assets. He reviewed the evidence Warren had compiled and told me we had an extremely strong case. Garrett's forgery of my signature on the mortgage documents alone constituted criminal activity. The hidden accounts and diverted funds were clear evidence of financial misconduct. Garrett hired his own lawyer and attempted to negotiate. He wanted to minimize his losses, protect whatever assets he could salvage, maintain some dignity in the settlement. Preston shut down every attempt. With the evidence we had gathered, Garrett had no leverage. The divorce was finalized 4 months after the gala. Under the terms of the settlement, I retained full ownership of our house, with Garrett responsible for paying off the fraudulent second mortgage he had taken out. I received restitution of $150,000 from his remaining assets, partial compensation for the money he had hidden and spent on his double life. He was ordered to pay spousal support for 3 years. It was not enough to undo the damage. No amount of money could give me back the years I had wasted believing in our marriage. But it was something. It was justice, or at least as close to justice as the legal system could provide. Jocelyn pursued her own legal action. She filed for custody of Lily and the baby, which was granted without contest. Garrett was ordered to pay child support for both children, though given his destroyed career, the payments were modest. Jocelyn did not want his money anyway. She just wanted him out of her life. Ingrid cut all ties immediately after the gala. She blocked Garrett on every platform, warned her social circle about him, and eventually posted her story online as a cautionary tale for other women. Her account went viral in certain corners of the internet, adding another layer of public humiliation to Garrett's disgrace. His parents struggled to process what their son had done. Richard retreated into silence, refusing to discuss the situation with anyone. Diane maintained contact with me, calling weekly to check on how I was doing, apologizing repeatedly for her son's behavior, as if she bore some responsibility for it. I told her every time that none of this was her fault, that Garrett alone had made these choices. 6 months after the divorce was final, I received an unexpected visitor. Jocelyn showed up at my door one evening with Lily and the baby, whom she had named Marcus. She apologized for arriving without warning and asked if we could talk. We sat in my living room while Lily played with Peanut, delighted by the friendly cat. Jocelyn told me she had been thinking a lot about everything that happened. She said she was grateful to me for exposing the truth, even though learning it had been devastating. She said she had spent 5 years building a life on lies, and discovering the reality, however painful, had ultimately set her free. I understood exactly what she meant. Before she left, Jocelyn said something that surprised me. She said she did not hate me, had never hated me, even for a moment. She said she knew we were both victims of the same man, and there was no point in directing anger at each other when Garrett was the one who deserved it. She asked if I might be open to staying in touch, not as friends exactly, but as two people who had survived the same storm. I agreed. In the strange mathematics of Garrett's betrayal, Jocelyn and I had become connected in ways neither of us had chosen. We had both loved him. We had both believed him. We had both lost years of our lives to his deceptions. That shared experience created a bond neither of us could fully explain. We kept in touch after that night. Occasional texts, coffee meetings every few months, updates on our lives and our healing. Jocelyn eventually met someone new, a kind man who treated her and her children with genuine respect. I attended their small wedding a year later, sitting in the back, happy to see her finally getting the honest love she deserved. Garrett, meanwhile, continued his downward spiral. Without his career, his reputation, or his carefully constructed lies to sustain him, he had nothing. Last I heard, he was working freelance projects for low fees, living in a small apartment essentially alone. Jocelyn had full custody. Ingrid wanted nothing to do with him. His parents maintained minimal contact. He had built his entire life on deception, and when that foundation crumbled, everything collapsed with it. I did not feel sorry for him. I did not feel vindicated either. Mostly I felt nothing at all when I thought about Garrett, which seemed like the healthiest possible response. The first year after my divorce was the hardest. I moved through days mechanically teaching my classes, grading papers, maintaining routines that kept me functional without requiring me to feel very much. Nights were worse. I would lie awake replaying moments from my marriage, searching for signs I had missed, wondering how I could have been so blind. I started seeing a therapist 3 months after the gala. Her name was Dr. Ramirez, and she specialized in helping people recover from trauma related to betrayal and deception. She taught me that my inability to see Garrett's lies was not a personal failing. Skilled manipulators specifically target trusting people. They construct their deceptions to be invisible to anyone who loves them. Being fooled did not make me stupid. It made me human. Slowly, session by session, I started to believe her. Peanut remained my constant companion through those difficult months. He seemed to sense when I was struggling, appearing at my side during panic attacks in the middle of the night, purring against my chest until my heartbeat slowed. Animals have an instinct for emotional pain that humans often lack. Peanut's uncomplicated affection helped me more than I could express. I adopted a second cat about 8 months after the divorce. A gray and white female I found at the shelter, cowering in the back of her cage, afraid of everything. I named her Waffles because of the grid pattern on her fur. Bringing her home felt symbolic somehow, giving a safe space to another creature who had been abandoned and hurt. Work became my anchor. My students, 8 and 9-year-olds who came to school each day, ready to learn and grow, reminded me that there was still good in the world. I threw myself into lesson planning, created new activities, volunteered for after-school programs. The principal noticed my dedication and recommended me for a promotion to department head. I accepted, grateful for the distraction and the recognition. Sloane remained my closest friend through everything. She never wavered, never judged, never made me feel foolish for the years I had spent believing Garrett's lies. She listened when I needed to talk and distracted me when I needed to think about something else. We took a trip together to the mountains that first summer, hiking trails, and sleeping in a cabin, letting nature remind us how small human problems really were in the vastness of the world. 18 months after the divorce, I enrolled in a graduate program for education. I had always wanted to pursue a master's degree, but had put it off first for my career, then for my marriage, always finding reasons to delay. With Garrett gone, I had no more excuses. I started classes in the evenings after school, challenging myself intellectually in ways I had neglected for too long. 2 years after that night in Denver, I looked around at my life and realized I had built something good from the wreckage. I had my home paid off and truly mine. I had my cats, my job, my studies, my friends. I had learned things about myself I might never have discovered if my comfortable illusions had remained intact. I was stronger than I knew, more resilient than I imagined, capable of surviving what felt unsurvivable and finding my way back to something like happiness. I was 33 years old, single childless, and more at peace than I had been in years. Some people asked if I planned to date again to try for the relationship and family I had once wanted so badly. I told them honestly that I did not know. The wounds Garrett left were deep, and trusting someone that completely again felt terrifying. But I had learned that I could not predict the future, could not control what would happen or who might come into my life. All I could do was keep moving forward, keep healing, keep becoming the person I was meant to be. Garrett remained a distant figure, someone I heard about occasionally through mutual acquaintances. He had tried to rebuild his career with limited success. He saw his children during supervised visits that Jocelyn had reluctantly agreed to. He lived alone, dated occasionally, never seemed able to maintain anything lasting. The skills that had allowed him to deceive 3 women simultaneously apparently did not translate to genuine connection. I did not wish him ill. I did not wish him well either. I simply wished him gone from my thoughts, and most days he was. The last time I spoke to Diane, she told me she still loved her son but could not respect him. She said watching him face consequences for his actions had been one of the most painful experiences of her life, but also one of the most necessary. She believed people could change if they truly wanted to, but she was not sure Garrett had that capacity. He had spent so long constructing lies that she did not know if he even remembered what truth felt like. I thought about that observation often. It seemed to capture something essential about Garrett, about the hollowness at the center of who he was. He had built an entire existence around deception, and when the deceptions were stripped away, there was nothing underneath. No authentic self. No genuine relationships. Just emptiness where a real person should have been. Standing in front of my classroom on a bright spring morning, watching my students work on their assignments, I thought about everything I had survived. The betrayal, the public humiliation, the financial devastation, the shattering of every belief I had held about my marriage and my future. And I thought about where I had ended up stronger and wiser, and finally free. The pain had been real. The losses had been significant, but so was the growth, the healing, the discovery of my own resilience. Garrett had taken years from me, but he had not taken everything. He had not taken my capacity to trust myself. He had not taken my ability to love, even if I was not ready to risk that love again yet. He had not taken my future, which stretched out ahead of me, full of possibilities I could not yet imagine. That felt like victory enough. If you are watching this, and something in my story resonates with you, maybe because you are living with doubts, you are afraid to investigate, or recovering from a betrayal you did not see coming, or wondering if you will ever feel whole again, I want to leave you with this thought. The truth can be devastating. It can destroy the life you thought you had and force you to rebuild from nothing. But living in a lie is worse. At least truth, however painful, is solid ground. You can stand on it. You can build from it. You can find your way forward. You are stronger than you know. And you deserve to know the truth about the people you love. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything you believed? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who is struggling right now. If this story touched you, please give it a like to help others find it. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about resilience, truth, and the power of reclaiming your life. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, share it with them. Sometimes knowing we are not alone is the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you courage if you are facing hard truths, strength if you are rebuilding from betrayal, and peace when you finally reach the other side. Take care of yourself. You matter more than you know.